What happens when a beloved country music superstar sits down with television's most controversial talk show panel and everything goes terribly wrong? You won't believe what unfolds when Blake Shelton faces off against The View's most outspoken hosts in what became one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone sideways. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control when egos clash and tempers flare. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these worlds collide in the most dramatic fashion possible. The morning started like any other at the View Studios in New York City. Blake Shelton, fresh off his latest album release and riding high on the success of his recent tour, was scheduled to appear on the show to discuss his music career and his life after leaving The Voice. What should have been a straightforward promotional appearance quickly devolved into something far more sinister as the host seemed determined to turn what was meant to be entertainment into a political battlefield. From the moment Shelton walked onto the set, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Joy Behar, known for her sharp tongue and political commentary, sat at the table with what could only be described as a predatory gleam in her eye. Whoopi Goldberg maintained her usual stern demeanor, while the other panelists seemed to sense that something volatile was brewing beneath the surface of their carefully orchestrated daytime television facade. The initial pleasantries were exchanged with forced smiles and hollow laughter. Shelton, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, appeared relaxed and ready to discuss his music. He spoke about his latest songs, his touring experiences, and shared a few light-hearted anecdotes about life on the road. The audience responded warmly to his down-to-earth charm and genuine personality, but it was clear that the hosts had a different agenda brewing beneath their professional veneer. "So Blake," Joy Behar began, her voice carrying an edge that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the studio. "You've been pretty vocal about your political views in the past. Given everything that's happening in this country right now, I'm curious about your thoughts on some of the more controversial issues we're facing." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and Shelton's expression subtly changed as he realized this wasn't going to be the typical promotional chat he had expected. Shelton shifted slightly in his chair, his media-trained instincts kicking in as he attempted to navigate what was clearly becoming a minefield. "Well, Joy, I've always believed that music should bring people together rather than divide them. I try to keep my focus on entertaining folks and giving them something positive to connect with." His response was diplomatic, measured, and clearly designed to steer the conversation back to safer territory. But Behar wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with the intensity of someone who had found their target and wasn't about to let go. "That's a nice sentiment, Blake, but don't you think celebrities have a responsibility to use their platform to speak out about injustice? I mean, when you have millions of fans hanging on your every word, shouldn't you be more vocal about the issues that matter?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Shelton's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly and his hands clasped together in his lap. "I think everyone has the right to their own opinions. Joy, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on every political issue just because I happen to sing songs for a living. I respect my fans enough to let them make up their own minds about these things." Whoopi Goldberg, who had been silent up to this point, suddenly jumped into the fray with the authority of someone who clearly felt she held the moral high ground. "But Blake, that's exactly the problem, isn't it? This idea that we can just stay neutral while people are suffering. Your silence on certain issues speaks volumes about where you really stand." The accusation hit like a lightning bolt, and Shelton's entire demeanor shifted. His relaxed posture straightened, and for the first time since sitting down, his famous charm began to crack around the edges. "I'm sorry, but I think you're making some pretty big assumptions about me based on what I haven't said rather than what I have said. That doesn't seem particularly fair." The other panelists began to sense blood in the water. One of them chimed in with a question about Shelton's past social media posts, while another brought up comments he had allegedly made years earlier that had been taken out of context and twisted to fit a particular narrative. It was becoming clear that this wasn't an interview. It was an ambush carefully orchestrated and executed with the precision of a military operation. Shelton's publicist, who had been standing off to the side of the set, began shifting nervously as she watched her client being systematically attacked by what was supposed to be a friendly morning talk show. The audience, initially excited to see their favorite country star, began to murmur uncomfortably as they witnessed what was unfolding before their eyes. "Look," Shelton said, his voice beginning to carry a warning tone that anyone familiar with his Oklahoma roots would recognize immediately. "I came here to talk about music and maybe share a laugh or two with your viewers. I didn't sign up to be lectured about my personal beliefs or have my character questioned based on your assumptions about who you think I am. But Joy Behar was relentless, her voice rising with each word as she pressed her attack. Character Blake, your character is exactly what we're talking about here. When you choose to remain silent while marginalized communities are under attack, when you refuse to use your platform to speak out against injustice, that tells us everything we need to know about your character. The studio audience fell completely silent now, the uncomfortable tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Shelton's face flushed red and his hands gripped, the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. This was no longer about politics or social issues. This had become a personal attack on a man who had come on their show in good faith, expecting to promote his work and connect with fans. What happened next would set the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations in daytime television history as Blake Shelton reached his breaking point and the gloves finally came off. The breaking point came when Shelton finally pushed back, his Oklahoma drawl thickening with barely contained anger. "Now hold on just a damn minute," he said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "You don't know the first thing about me, lady. You sit here in your little bubble making judgments about people you've never met, thinking you're some kind of moral authority. That's rich coming from someone who makes a living tearing people down on national television." Joy Behar's face went crimson, her liberal sensibilities apparently offended by the very suggestion that her motives might be questioned. "Excuse me, I'm holding you accountable, Blake. That's what journalists do. We ask the hard questions that your adoring fans won't ask." Her voice dripped with condescension as she leaned back in her chair with the smugness of someone who believed she had the moral high ground firmly secured. But Shelton wasn't backing down anymore. The facade of the polite media-trained celebrity had completely evaporated, replaced by the authentic voice of a man who had been pushed too far. "Journalist, is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like a coordinated hit job. You invited me here under false pretenses, and now you're trying to bully me into saying what you want me to say so you can go viral on social media." The accusation hit home, and the uncomfortable shifting among the panel members made it clear that Shelton had struck a nerve. Whoopi Goldberg tried to regain control of the situation, her voice taking on that authoritative tone she was famous for. "Like nobody's trying to bully you. We're having a conversation about responsibility and using your platform for good. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why." Shelton's laugh was bitter and humorless. "Responsibility. You want to talk about responsibility? How about the responsibility to treat your guests with basic respect? How about the responsibility to have an honest conversation instead of setting up some kind of political gotcha moment? You're lecturing me about using my platform while you're using yours to ambush people who don't share your worldview." The tension in the studio had reached a fever pitch. The audience sat in stunned silence, some looking genuinely uncomfortable as they witnessed what was supposed to be light entertainment turn into something far more ugly and personal. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming a train wreck of epic proportions. Another panelist, sensing an opportunity to pile on, decided to join the attack. "Blake, I think what we're trying to understand is how someone with your influence can claim to care about people while remaining silent on issues that directly affect their lives. Don't you see how that comes across as hypocritical?" Shelton's eyes flashed with genuine anger now. "Hypocritical? You want to know what's hypocritical? Sitting here pretending to care about people while you systematically try to destroy anyone who doesn't toe your political line. You talk about marginalized communities, but what about the millions of Americans in small towns and rural areas whose voices you completely ignore and dismiss? What about their struggles and their perspectives?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and the uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes about the panel's inability to acknowledge any viewpoint outside their own narrow worldview. Joy Behar recovered first, her voice now openly hostile. "Oh, so now we're playing the victim card. Poor Blake Shelton, the multimillionaire country star who's being oppressed by mean liberal women asking him tough questions." The mockery in her voice was unmistakable, and it was exactly the wrong approach to take with someone who was already feeling cornered and attacked. Shelton's face went stone cold, and when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet intensity that was somehow more threatening than any shout. "You know what, Joy? You just showed everybody exactly who you really are. This isn't about politics or social justice or any of the high-minded principles you claim to represent. This is about you feeling superior to people you consider beneath you." Whoopi tried once again to regain control, but her efforts only served to escalate the situation further. "Blake, I think you're being unfair. We're not attacking you personally. We're questioning your positions on important issues. But her words rang hollow after the obvious personal attacks and condescending tone that had characterized the entire exchange. Shelton shook his head in disgust. Unfair lady, you've been attacking me personally since the moment I sat down. You've questioned my character, my integrity, and my values based on nothing more than your own prejudices and assumptions. And now you have the nerve to claim this is some kind of legitimate journalistic inquiry. The situation was spiraling completely out of control now, with both sides dug in and no sign of anyone backing down. The producers in the control room were undoubtedly having panic attacks as they watched their show descend into chaos. But the cameras kept rolling, capturing every uncomfortable moment for posterity. Another panelist made the mistake of trying to lecture Shelton about his privilege and his responsibility to be an ally, which only served to pour gasoline on an already raging fire. Shelton's response was swift and devastating. Don't you dare lecture me about privilege while you sit there in your Manhattan studio, completely disconnected from the real world. You want to talk about responsibility? How about taking responsibility for the divisive rhetoric you spew every single day? How about taking responsibility for contributing to the very polarization you claim to be fighting against? The accusation clearly stung, and Joy Behar's mask finally slipped completely as she abandoned any pretense of professionalism. You know what your problem is, Blake? You can't handle being challenged. You're so used to having your ego stroked by your fans that you can't deal with anyone questioning your comfortable little worldview. It was a devastating personal attack delivered with venom and designed to wound. But instead of backing down, Shelton leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked on Behar's with laser-like intensity. My problem, lady, my problem is that I trusted you people to have an honest conversation and instead I walked into an ambush. My problem is that I gave you the benefit of the doubt when I should have known better. The confrontation had reached a point of no return, with both sides now openly hostile and any pretense of civility completely abandoned. What happened next would shock everyone in that studio and create a moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. Joy Behar, perhaps emboldened by what she perceived as support from her co-hosts, decided to deliver what she clearly intended to be the killing blow. You know what, Blake? Maybe the problem isn't that we're asking tough questions. Maybe the problem is that you just can't handle the fact that your time is up. Country music is changing. America is changing. And maybe there just isn't room for people with your outdated views anymore. The words hit the studio like a physical blow. The audience gasped audibly, and even some of the other panelists looked uncomfortable with how far Behar had pushed things. But she wasn't done yet. Maybe it's time for you to step aside and let artists with more progressive values take center stage. Maybe your fans deserve better than someone who's stuck in the past. For a moment, the studio fell completely silent. Shelton sat perfectly still, his face a mask of controlled fury as he processed what had just been said to him on national television. The insult was so profound, so personal, and so completely unprofessional that even the seasoned television crew seemed stunned by the audacity of it. When Shelton finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet, but every word carried the weight of absolute conviction. You know what, Joy? You just proved everything I suspected about you and this entire show. You don't care about having real conversations. You don't care about understanding different perspectives. You just want to tear people down who don't fit into your narrow little worldview. He paused, looking around the table at each of the hosts with undisguised contempt. You talk about progress and change, but what you're really talking about is silencing anyone who doesn't think exactly like you do. You've turned what should be a platform for open dialogue into a weapon for attacking people whose only crime is being different from you. Whoopi Goldberg, sensing that things had gone too far even by their standards, tried to salvage the situation with damage control. Blake, I think emotions are running high here. Maybe we can take a step back, but Shelton cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, Whoopi. We're way past that point now. Your colleague here just told me on national television that there's no place for people like me in America anymore. She just told millions of viewers that my fans deserve better than me. So, let's not pretend this is about emotions running high. This is about showing your true colors. The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. The audience sat in stunned silence, many of them clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond entertainment or even heated debate. This had become a character assassination attempt playing out in real time. Joy Behar, rather than backing down or attempting to defuse the situation, doubled down on her attack. Well, maybe if the shoe fits Blake, maybe if you're feeling attacked, it's because you know deep down that what I'm saying has some truth to it. Maybe it's time to examine why you're so defensive about your beliefs. That was the final straw. Shelton's composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor, the sound echoing through the dead silence like a gunshot. "That's it," he said, his voice now carrying the full force of his anger. "I'm done with this circus. I came here in good faith to talk about my music and connect with fans. And instead, I walked into a planned ambush by a group of bullies who think they are morally superior to everyone else." He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and controlled despite his obvious fury. "You want to know what's really outdated? It's this idea that you can treat people like garbage and then hide behind some noble cause to justify your behavior. It's this notion that disagreeing with you makes someone a bad person who deserves to be publicly humiliated." The host sat in stunned silence as Shelton continued his devastating critique. "You talk about values and responsibility. But where are your values when it comes to treating your guests with basic human decency? Where's your responsibility to have honest, respectful conversations instead of orchestrating hit jobs?" As he tossed his microphone onto the table, the sound reverberated through the studio like a declaration of war. "You know what the real tragedy is here? You had an opportunity to bridge divides, to actually bring people together through genuine dialogue. Instead, you chose to use your platform to bully and attack someone who came here with an open heart." Joy Behar, perhaps realizing that she had pushed things too far, attempted a weak response. "Blake, if you can't handle..." "No," Shelton interrupted, his voice cutting through her words like steel. "You don't get to spin this. You don't get to make this about me not being able to handle criticism. This is about you showing the entire country exactly who you really are underneath all the righteous rhetoric." He looked directly into the camera, speaking now to the viewers at home rather than the hostile panel surrounding him. "Folks, what you just witnessed here is everything that's wrong with our national conversation right now. These people invited me here not to have a discussion, but to try to destroy me for the crime of thinking differently than they do." The power of the moment was undeniable. Here was a man who had been systematically attacked and degraded, turning the tables and exposing the toxic behavior of his attackers with calm, devastating precision. The hosts, who had seemed so confident and righteous in their assault, now appeared small and petty in comparison. "The really sad part," Shelton continued, his voice now carrying a note of genuine disappointment, "is that there are real issues facing this country that deserves serious discussion. But instead of having those conversations, you'd rather score cheap political points by tearing down anyone who doesn't conform to your worldview." As he began to walk away from the table, the full impact of what had just happened began to sink in. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a powerful moment of pushback against the culture of attack journalism that had become so prevalent in modern media. "You know what's not outdated," Shelton said, turning back for one final shot. "Treating people with respect, having honest conversations, building bridges instead of burning them. Those values will never go out of style, no matter how hard you try to shame people for holding them." With that, Blake Shelton walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a panel of stunned hosts, a shocked studio audience, and a moment of television that would be talked about and analyzed for years to come. The man who had entered the studio as a guest promoting his music left as someone who had struck a blow for dignity and respectful discourse in an increasingly hostile media landscape. The silence he left in his wake spoke louder than any words could have about the profound impact of what had just transpired in that New York studio.